Hello, Tom, aka Gedeon here for Tabletop Tap Room, and today we have part 2 of the Tim Kask interview. So enough of me gas bagging. Let's get right to it.
In 2010, you founded Eldritch Enterprises with some nobodies, Menser, Ward, Clark.
Yeah.
My wife heard me practicing that. She goes, "You can't say that." I says, he's gonna laugh.
I did tell her you were right.
These, if nothing else, the four of you are essentially role playing elites or royalty, if there's such a thing. So your company's on drive-through, and what is Eldritch Enterprises all about?
It was nothing now. We were beset with problems from the beginning. We had four primary investors. 3 of them kicked in what they committed to, and the 4th one didn't. So we were already underfunded at the beginning. We had management issues amongst ourselves. Jim Ward wanted to put a product out every month, which was absolutely 4 old guys are not going to put a product out every month.
Okay.
Unless we got a year and a half to get a head start,
Right.
Our first among equals was way too much first among. We didn't even feel like equals after a little while. And we were capable, Jim and Chris and I were capable of churning out 3 or 4 products a year, but our partner wasn't. And so if he couldn't, we couldn't.
Oh, so that's not really going. But to research this, I actually ordered your Dark Colony.
The only science fiction I ever wrote, gaming. It's the only science fiction gaming I ever wrote.
Well, because my jam is Star Frontiers, and writing for the fan magazine, and so I says I'm going to check this out. This looks interesting. Now, my only criticism of this module is you needed a D1, D2, D3 on here, because I thought I was ordering the first one in the series, and I ordered the third.
Oh. Well, I can get you the other 2. I probably have copies in my basement.
I should have shown you these.
Okay. I could probably get them for you. I have a hardbound set of all 3. The only one made that I know of, because I ordered it through drive-through for myself, using some of our company credits.
Well,
let me tell you a little story about that. And the same thing. This is about Eldritch. The other 3 guys thought it'd be a great idea to do a fantasy fiction anthology, because they all had aspirations or had been fantasy writers. Wasn't my bag. I said, yeah, I'm not interested. Well, they told the world that we're all going to be writing in this anthology. So I dragged my feet and ignored it, and finally Chris got a hold of me and said, all right, jig's up, quit screwing around. You got to have a story. We got to have one. I said, fine, I'll give you one story. And so I sat down and I wrote a story that I'm extremely proud of, and that I had many people that I don't think were just trying to kiss my ass tell me it was their favorite story in the book, or they enjoy, So I'm pretty pleased with the story. But that's how I got in there, because they told everybody I was gonna. Kicking and screaming. That's how the 3rd Dark got me in it. They told everybody that we're all going to work on this. Thanks. They announced that to the world without consulting with me. I'd never done anything science fiction. I had not edited any science fiction. I had no idea. I did not want to do the standard, here's an encounter, here's the bad, and so unbeknownst to me, I came up with an idea that, according to Chris Clark, whose expertise and knowledge of the broad field of game design, I don't know of anybody who's got a bigger one or a better one. He said nobody'd used that approach before ever. And again, I wrote up, 25 or 30 encounters as after action reports. Okay, here's what actually happened. Now, you as a DM, if you can't take that as an idea for how you can make that happen, I'm sorry. That's the best I can do, because I'm not going to sit down and write out 12 encounters. I'm going to give you 25 or 30 to choose from, and you can figure out how they occurred, however you want, in whatever sequence you want. And Chris was blown away. He said nobody had ever done it like that. He thought it was a brilliant approach. Jim was cool with it because it was new and different, and Frank thought it was stupid. But then Frank didn't like anything we were doing at the end, and Frank's most of the reason we broke up and died, because he couldn't write stuff as fast as we could. And he wanted everything to go through his hands. And I mean, Chris and I have only got, I don't know, God knows how many years editing experience. But no, we couldn't edit his stuff, and he's going to go over a final edit on all our stuff. And it just was he wasn't even first among equals. We weren't even equals. Okay. And so it quickly sank into the mud.
Well, I'm sad to hear that, but
died.
Here's my impression of this, because I didn't read it. I skimmed it, and I wrote a little review on it for the fan magazine, because this is fantastic, because this is 121 pages. There's 74 black and white illustrations in it, which is almost like an illustration every page.
Yeah.
22 maps. There's a mission brief. There are 10 incident reports as handouts. There's a one-page directory of 40 NPCs that can be printed and handed out to the players. There's another one-page directory of 40 NPCs with notes for the DM on them. It's not a railroad. There's two different agencies, two different things involved, multiple mysteries here. So
see, that's why I did incident reports rather than railroad them through. Here, do what you want. What makes sense for your story.
And it occurred to me today what this really is. This is a master's class in how to do a module, because this is not even a module. It's not a railroad. It's not a one evening shot. This is like a campaign all by itself. And this
when you think that's the third part.
Yeah, I got the other two here. I haven't even looked at them. But it occurred to me
they're not as good because I didn't have anything to do with them.
This is like a master's class in how you do it. I mean, because I've ordered stuff off drive-through that was like 10 pages, one map, and I'm going to have to do a little bit of work to be able to use this. You guys did an insane amount of work. I can't believe how good this is. And it's cool. The plot here, I've only seen this plot done in one Star Frontiers module, I won't say which, and one Star Trek episode. And this is the best treatment of that kind of a plot hook that I've ever seen.
Well, that's nice.
You kicked ass on a Star Trek episode, and you kicked ass on a.
Now, let me interject here. If it resembles one of those other episodes, Star Trek, I may have seen it, especially if it was first series. I may have seen it way back when. When I came back into the business in 2006, after being out all those years, 18 years I was away from the business, I made a point of not reading anybody else's stuff. When we decided a couple of years before we actually did it that we were going to, let's get the band together and do Eldritch, I did not read anybody else's stuff. I didn't read anybody else's modules. I didn't read anybody else's game systems. Now, I was already familiar with Swords and Wizardry because that's just the best clone of generic D&D there is. I even wrote a foreword to one of the editions. But I can honestly say that, no, that couldn't possibly have had an influence on me. Somebody asked me about something in the Ravenloft series that in my world, there are a couple of things that are similar to things in Ravenloft. And they wanted to know, was that an influence? I said, no, I haven't read Ravenloft.
Right.
I firmly believe, and I've believed this since I went to work in 75. I believe that parallel development is a thing. I believe it's a supreme height of ego to think that only one person, if it hadn't been Gary and Dave, somebody else. If it hadn't been Dave, it would have been somebody else out of that group. If it hadn't been Gary, it would have been somebody else that came up with this idea. They did. They packaged it and sold it well. But to say that Gary or Dave were the only possible people that could ever come up with Dungeons and Dragons is silly on the part of an outsider to say, and massively egotistically hubristic for either Gary or Dave to have said, which to my knowledge, neither one of them ever said anything like that. I believe that I could have had ideas about how my world worked. Forgotten Realms could have had ideas. I don't even know who wrote Forgotten Realms. They could have had a similar idea because we probably got it out of the same paperback. Because all of us old game and especially adventure designers, we still steal ideas. One of the best compliments I can give a new book is, oh man, there's some neat ideas there. I'm stealing. I'm going to lift those and put them into my next game. That's one of the highest praises that an old school gamer like myself can give. I just read a book by Carrie Burgoyne, who had, oh man, there's a couple things in the first fable that absolutely are going to show up someday in one of my games. I just read Hans Cummings' newest book. Oh, there's a couple of concepts in there that, oh yeah, thanks Hans. I'm gonna adopt this in the first chance I get. I think we creatives do that. You can't create something out of whole cloth. You can't one day wake up on the beach naked and uneducated and think up a fantasy world full of dragons. Yeah, well, you could, I guess, if you're insane.
I'm coming.
A normal person isn't likely to be able to do that, make that leap of creativity. Not likely.
I'm close to the that point where I reached 200 published articles in the fan magazines. I've been published in 3 different fan magazines. I don't keep track of the number, but I know I'm coming in close on 200. And
how many people are watching us now? Anybody?
Well, no, I'm just recording it. Then I'm going to edit it.
Okay.
And
because I've done live streams where there were people at the same time, and
I've not done that yet. I'm so new to YouTubing. I'm just
all I do is I don't even do 2 people. I probably could figure out how to do that. I use a recording program called Debut, and I don't even edit mine. I send mine. I publish them private on YouTube, and then my IT guy who lives in Thailand, he puts it all together, puts the thing on the front, puts the commercials on the back. I don't do any of that. I don't know how to do any of that.
Well, I'm so new to this. My special needs, my daughter with special needs told me the other day, she's like, Dad, you got to get an intro. Getting critiqued by my 20-year-old daughter with special needs.
Well, depending upon her situation, and circumstance, well, if she's a high functioning autistic, well, yeah, she'd very likely point that out. I was potty trained by my cousin who used to babysit me, who had cerebral palsy. So I never saw my cousin as handicapped. And when I had, when I found out I had a daughter with some birth defects, like my first child, I just determined I was just never going to treat her like she was handicapped. That's not how I see her. It's not how I treat her. Hey, you've got responsibilities. You do them. You want to do this. You can do it. And when I went back to teaching at an advanced stage after I'd, when I went back in early aughts, I did a lot of system sub work, and there's one particular system that I worked in for several years that I had several special needs teachers that would request me because I could do it. I knew how to do it. I wasn't creeped out by it because I'd already had at that time about 15 years work with an organization called Fishing Has No Boundaries that works with people with physical disabilities. Some of them never been out on a boat. In fact, I wrote an essay for a guy's book. Guy wrote a feel-good book. positive, one of those, I don't mean it quite as nasty when I say one of those John Handy books, be happy, things could be worse. And and he also specialized in setting up financial programs for the parents of special needs children to look after them, later on. He was kind of one of the very first ones in this area to get into that field. He kind of invented that field because he also worked with us with this organization. So I was pretty comfortable with it all. And I first few times I subbed for these various teachers, they got good reports back. The students liked me. So there was several teachers that I would get a week-long assignment with their kids. Now, I didn't take the ones that didn't have enough help, because certain classes you need a couple of aides simply to help keep all the cats focused on task. It's hurting cats some days. But no, I spent 20 years helping build an organization that it's still going now, even made it through the pandemic, working with people's special needs. So,
Well, you just scored points with my wife. She's a special ed director at a school district here in Maine. So,
okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, I enjoyed it. Again, though, I will admit that there were a couple of classes that I didn't care to go back to, did a couple of times. And there were others that I was just delighted to see the request for me from that particular teacher, because I knew the students, I knew the aides, and I fit right in. Back before I went back to get my master's, which was like in the mid-aughts, in fact, it was around 9/11. I was working in another district almost exclusively with their incorrigibles. This is their last chance. Okay, they were in the classroom. There was nothing but computer monitors, and they had to do all this standardized, advanced. Everything was computer lessons, and they had to do them in order and everything. And I got along really, really well with them, and so well that unsolicited, I got this lovely 2-page letter from the director of the program. If I ever needed a reference to get a full-time job, whatever, she wrote me this thing. So I seemed to do well in unusual circumstances when I was teaching, and I enjoyed it.
So
one year, when I was a system sub, I did everything that year from preschool to special ed at the high school. Of course, it wasn't called special ed then. You know what I'm saying? I mean, no disrespect. But I did everything that year, and I decided in another life I was going to be a teacher. It would not be an elementary school teacher. They got the hardest job there is. They get no break. They're there in the morning and they're doing playground duty. At lunch, they're doing lunchroom duty, and they get a 20, 25-minute lunch break. They're taking the kids out to the toilet 2 or 3 times a day, and then they're doing playground duty after school. They get no breaks. They get no time to themselves. They don't even get a decent lunch.
We're getting good stories from my stepson who just graduated from University of Maine, Orono, with 2 degrees, and he's working as a music teacher in Massachusetts at 2 different schools. So one school hires him part-time, the other school hires him part-time. So together it's a full-time job, and both school systems have done this for years. But we're getting crazy stories from him from teaching music to elementary.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's like teaching cats how to play a saxophone.
He's and it's just funny. And of course, his mother's, her whole career has been teaching. So, I listen in, and it's just a laugh a minute sometimes with the stories he's telling.
I can only imagine.
It's his 2nd year in teaching now, and but
if he makes it 5, the odds say that he'll stick.
Well,
there are so many teachers burning out in under 5 years. At least in our part of the country here, it's appalling. The attrition rate is just unbelievable.
He's such a hot ticket in the music field. His girlfriend is finishing her master's.
Here in Cincinnati, he couldn't get a job.
Well, he's been
teaching music. That was the first thing they started cutting when they started paring back music and the arts.
Well, he's been recruited to go to Yale to work on his master's. Somebody heard him saying, and they're like, "You need to apply at Yale," and he's like, "Well, money," and so they pulled some strings, and so it looks like he's going to Yale now. So we're
good for him.
We're kind of excited, especially since he won't be going, "Hey, mom, dad, help
money, yes, money,
which we don't have, but it's it is what it is. So
a friend of mine's son won a scholarship to Cooper Union, which is a big art and design school in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Free, completely, everything, no school fees whatsoever. Of course, maintaining a tiny hole in a hovel in the bottom floor of the sub basement, close enough to go to school at Cooper Union, you might as well be paying tuition and dorm fees at a medium range school in the Midwest, because just living there was so expensive. The rent was so expensive. It's like, the only thing I don't pay for is tuition. When most people are going, "Oh, sure, that's great." Yeah, the room and board's more than your tuition.
Yeah.
So
I want to circle back to something, because my notes here for the interview are totally trashed.
Oh, good. I've done my job.
We've gone all over the place, but
good.
You used to have blue sky sessions with Gary, and
that's when we would fantasize about the future of the company, games we might do, things like that. And they were back in the early days when we were still struggling.
Well, one of the things
because within 2 years the topics were so silly. Then, the 2 years later, it's like, how could we ever have worried about that?
Well, one of the things you've said about those is that you would have good scotch and lousy cigars.
No, it was never good scotch, and it
wasn't good scotch.
No, and it was lousy cigars. It was like black and tans and crap like that. Gary liked those little cigars on a wooden tip, and so we'd smoke crappy cigars and drink cheap scotch. But the fact that we were taking time off, we were like guilty schoolboys playing hooky. And we'd get this time off, and we didn't sit down, we relax, and the first 10 minutes or so it'd be how the company's going, trends in the game, whatever, and then we'd start spinning off into blue skies, and blue skies like, one day we'll have a print run, it'll be 15,000. Yeah, right, have another sip. And of course, within 2 years we're having print runs at 35,000, and someday we'll do a game on, oh yeah, right. And we, a couple of years later we did it. It was, I think it was a chance to, in a non-judgmental, non-threatening way, we vocalized our dreams of what we'd like to see the company do. And we exceeded our wildest blue sky sessions.
Well, what I was curious about, because actually Gary passed away, and the date that my father passed away is very, very close. And I'm not a scotch drinker, but my father was. And I was thinking,
well, his taste got better as he got more money.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you, was what was Gary's preferred, what was Gary's favorite brand of scotch?
Oh, when he could afford good stuff, I couldn't tell you because I didn't drink it with him then. When with the crap we drank was probably, given the time and the prices, and that was probably like $6, $8 a bottle, which was, if you multiply that by 6 or 8 for inflation, big deal. $50 bottle scotch is, when you can spend $300 without, even breaking a sweat. So, and to this day, I'm not a scotch drinker. Though the other night I was over at a friend's house, and this guy came over with some really smooth 12-year-old that I only had just part of a shot just so I could sip and taste and flavor it. It was wonderful. And if we'd had, well, we couldn't have afforded anything back
Yeah.
then. We wouldn't have known what to do with it. Our palates were so. We used to have wine tasting parties, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had this guy came up, and this guy would come up every so many weeks. And first couple of times, we didn't know any better. We just got hammered. Oh, just hammered. And Gary and Brian and I'd be sitting in there, and he's, all right, well, now he'd crack open, well, you got to try this. And so instead of tasting it, slurp, slurp, slurp.
You guys were enjoying doing games.
Yeah, but this was after we were in the Gray House, so we were better off, and like I said, every 6-8 weeks, and it wasn't right away when we moved into the house, but that's how I learned all about German wines, which is German whites are what I prefer today. My wife doesn't like German whites; she likes other drier wines, and she likes reds, and I'm not a big red drinker.
Oh, well, you and your wife and I would probably get along then.
Well, yeah, but she also drinks, Moscatos and things like that.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah. And so, I'm much more into a good. I'll think of the name in a minute. I'm more the German river wines. I'm blanking.
I couldn't name one.
Well, I learned all about the rankings, Cabernet and Mid-Pedicot, and and I learned all those, and I learned what I liked. But the first couple of times, the first time I didn't even know it was coming. Hey, come on in, we're gonna taste some wine, okay? And Gary and I don't think Gary got quite as hammered as Brian and I did, because Brian and I weren't as frequent of drinkers as Gary was. I was going to say you froze there for a minute. And so by the time this guy walked out an hour and a half later, I got no work done the rest of the day, and I probably wasn't in any good enough shape to drive home, even by the time it was time to drive home. This is after we had 2 cars, and I was no longer having to leave at 1:30 or 2, so she could go to work at 3. And so that's how we would try them, and then I'll go, well, I'll get 2 bottles, and we'd see if we could get up a case between us. My car, when he joined, he got in on it, and there were like 5 or 6 of us at the end that would do these things, and so it got easier and easier to make up a case. Somebody just had to, okay, such and such a wine, Tim 2, Mike 3, Gary 4, and where they went, we paid for them, and then when they got there, everybody divvied up the wine and took it home, what they bought, and those are great fun. But the first couple of times, until we learned to make sure, the wine guy's coming, let me go eat lunch first. I mean, we were hammered. If that building had caught fire on the first floor, we'd all burned to death. Just hammered. And I'm not a big alcohol drinker. I was a bigger alcohol drinker then, but I kind of paired off alcohol after I went overseas. Realized that all that drinking didn't lower that goddamn ocean. I'm not even a hair's width. So I couldn't drink it dry. There's no reason to quit. Keep trying. And I switched off. And nowadays I just don't like to mix my intoxicants.
Right. Well, yeah. I worked in construction, and my business partner was Sicilian, and I hadn't drunk. I went to seminary, and so it was a whole don't drink.
Yeah, you're kind of a goody two shoes, and your sister was a goody two shoes. Yeah,
I started drinking red wine. It's good for your heart. I was having red wine with him. He's Sicilian. We'd go to a pizza joint, and he'd order a carafe of wine. I'd have a glass with him. And so I was
one glass of red wine. There's nothing wrong with that, and you build up a tolerance that you can go back to work afterwards.
I was trying to ask him about that whole red wine with red meat and white wine with white meat, and he shut me down so fast. He says, "Nah, you drink what the hell you like." And I found that piece of advice applies to everything, whether it's a role play what the hell you like.
Yeah.
Oh, you
Yeah.
want to play 5e? Play 5e.
You want to have a white wine with a steak? Have a white wine with a steak.
Well, we've kind of gone all over the map. There's one thing I did want to say is that back in my freshman year of high school.
What year was that?
Yeah, that'd be 1981.
Okay, that was right after I left TSR. Okay.
Right after you left TSR. But I was my grades had dropped just because I was bored, and so they were putting this pressure on me to go into this this special tutoring program, and it meant that I had a guidance counselor who met with me every week because our school guidance counselor, I don't even remember that person. And at the end of the year, this guy, he wrote this thing for all the students that were in the program. And it was kind of like his vision for you, for your life in the future. And what he wrote about me is he wrote that I would get an editorship at Dragon Magazine because he knew I was into D&D. And
too bad that didn't work out, did it?
No, it didn't work out because Dragon doesn't exist. But I kind of just that's cool. Forgot about it. Life happens. You get injured in construction, and you're home. You start getting involved in fan magazines, and eventually.
Well, we evolve. If we don't evolve, we stagnate.
I founded a fan magazine with a NASA consultant, Tom Stevens, and that magazine's gone for 34 issues. And at one point, I woke up and I realized this is, what? I'm living my 14-year-old dream. With the fan mag. Yeah, I'm not getting paid. It's not Dragon, but I'm living the dream, and so I really appreciate you coming on the show and letting me kiss the ring because you were the first editor of Dragon. It's a special honor to me.
Well, at the time, we had no idea what momentous things we were doing at the time.
And this is the first time in 54 years of my life that I've been able to say, yeah, I got to kiss the ring.
Ooh, well, I hope you don't drool. I couldn't be a bishop if too many of my people drooled. I couldn't hold back a wet hand. No, I don't think so.
I'll tell you what, though.
You can see how seriously I take it. I appreciate the sentiment. I really do. I'm not making light of that. Yeah. I know that I had a disproportionate effect on a whole lot of people's lives. And I'm fortunate to have done it, and I'm proud of what we did. Anecdotally, I've had so many people over the years come up and say, I was shy, I was disinterested, etc. I found D&D, and all these great things happened. I came out of my shell. I found other people like me. We came out of our shells together. That's very, very, very gratifying. But I'm quick to point out, it's not like that's what we set out to do. We had a really neat game, and we wanted people to see our really neat game. We didn't realize that it was going to bring autistic people out of their shell. We didn't realize that it was going to bring antisocial people together and form their own. We might have talked about that in a Blue Sky session or something like that.
Sure.
And no matter what our wildest dreams were, what happened far exceeded it. And I'm quick to point out when asked that, yeah, we were damn lucky. We came at a point in time when the popular culture was ready for it, when every head shop had a Frodo Lives psychedelic poster in the window. And Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers comics were being sold on the streets. Tolkien was popular. That bootleg edition of the Ballantine printing of Tolkien, The Hobbit, and that was wildly popular. And there we were. We found ourselves at this intersection of 17 different cultural phenomenon, and we knew we were there, and we played the strings pretty well. I'll pat ourselves on the back for that. But if all the rest of it hadn't been there, waiting for us to come in and pull those strings, it wouldn't have happened this way. We came along at a time in the culture when the culture was ready for something like this. We did a damn fine job of convincing people that they were ready and they wanted this. I'll take credit for that. But Gary wouldn't have told you, Dave wouldn't have told you that he had some vision one night and some dream of 50,000 people showing up at Gen Con to play D&D. Neither one of them were ever that bad at stretching and telling tall tales. They wouldn't even have thought of telling that tall tale. It would have been so ludicrous. That wasn't even blue sky. That was somewhere out near Alpha Centauri sky with no air, thinking about that. We were good at what we did. We were an amazing collection of people that all gravitated into Lake Geneva, and a lot of creatives. But then again, I was able to discover so many artists and writers because there were no outlets. All these frustrated artists and frustrated writers had nowhere to send their art. Most of them didn't even care if I paid them. They just wanted people to see it. Yeah. The fact that I did pay every one of them, and paid them well, was just icing on the cake. They didn't care. So we found ourselves at a nexus in space and time and culture that had fertile ground for what we did. And then we did a really good job of planting and nurturing the crop for a few years until it took off. I often liken it to when the rocket took off. About the time Dallas Egbert was missing down there and the first scare, all that stuff, that shot the rocket off. And we had a couple of stages on that one. Dallas Egbert supposedly getting lost in the steam tunnels in Dallas. Holy cow, what that did to our sales. Wow. All of a sudden we were something. Yeah. No such thing as bad publicity.
I guess not.
Nope. We weathered 2 satanic scares. There was one, a mild one before the one that made out on the TV in the 80s. There was a big backlash in the mid and late 70s of little, they were usually like, and I mean no disrespect, but it seems to me that when a small splinter church has more than 3 words in its name, the more words it has, the more likely it is to be somewhere out in a splinter somewhere. Well, when the little church of Jesus Christ, the Blessed Lamb of God, decides they think this is horrible, all right, it's some little splinter church in Minneapolis or Minnesota or North Dakota, I don't know. Anyway, they made all their kids bring all their books in, and they got a big bulldozer, and they piled them all up in the parking lot, and they ran over them with the bulldozer so energetically that they tore up their asphalt parking lot. And when we read about that in a little article someone had sent to us, Brian asked Gary which of our distributors serviced that area, and told Kevin or whoever it was at the time, double their standing order. And sure enough, all those kids bought their books back. So we just sold more books. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for ruining the books. And that's what was happening back then. Then that was the first one that was really isolated incidents of accusations of demonology, all that silly shit. The second one was after I left TSR, when they're on Tom Snyder, and a woman who was a poor parent blamed D&D because her kid hurt himself. And if she'd been a better parent and known what he was doing, he wouldn't have had a chance to do it. But of course, nobody could say that at the time because you were being an insensible brute. An insensitive brute if you even suggested that she was a poor parent. So, it's survived the scares, the scandals. It's still going strong. Yeah, now the biggest argument about it is which edition do you play?
The edition, and again, I go back to Ed Speciale telling me, drink what the hell you like. No.
If you watch my videos, which I'll plug here, they're Curmudgeon and Cellar on YouTube. I'm up to almost number 200 numbered, which means I've done about 225 of them. Anyway, I always, whatever one you use, that's fine. If you're having fun, you've done it. People ask me, how do I know if I'm a good DM? Did your players come back next week? They did. You're a good DM.
Setting the bar a little low there.
No. What is it? What is the first thing you got to do? You got to find a group that wants to play.
Right.
And you got to hold that group together. And if they've come back 2 or 3 times, I say you've got a nicely tilled up garden ready for the seeds of your first campaign. But if you can't do that, if they don't come back, you're probably bad. It's kind of one of those litmus tests you can apply yourself. If your players keep coming back, you're doing something good. When they quit coming, they start dropping out, you're probably doing something bad.
We're going to build that as the Tim Kask litmus test.
Yeah, if your players come back, you're doing fine.
If they come back, you're doing all right.
Yeah. Because what do we get together for? To have fun. We got together the other night, a bunch of us, and we played Illuminati again.
That's why I stopped playing 3.5 D&D. I wasn't having any fun.
And 4.0, that's the one that looks like a pinball game that's slowed down to super slow-mo. It's like playing pinball, 4 is the one that got real nitty-gritty and slow, and it takes like 3 hours to do a simple encounter. If that's your bag, and this is what I say every week, if that's your bag and you're having fun, fine. If you want to know what I think about this or how would I handle that, I'm glad to share that with you. You want to tell me how you handle something? Even if I think it's dumb, I'm not going to say, oh, that's dumb. I'm going to say, well, that's one way you could do it. I might have done it thus and such. That was Gary's greatest disarming. How should I do such and how should I have interpreted this rule? Well, how'd you do? He always asked, how'd you do it? How'd you interpret it? And if it was good, yeah, I can think of a better way to do it. If it was bad, worse he'd say as well, I might have done it a different way. I'm the same thing with the curmudgeon. If you're having fun, more power to you. And I don't care if you're playing boards or you're playing minis or you're playing role-playing, because I play them all and I talk about them all. And it's all games and gaming to me. I started with Avalon Hills D-Day, and I was in the 6th grade.
Wow.
And I've been playing ever since. I'm 70. Oh, Jesus. I'll be 72. Yeah, I'll be 72 in January. Yeah, I guess I will. Yeah, I guess I am. Yeah. Well, anyway, so I've been playing a long time.
I was 37 for 4 years straight. Nobody ever caught on.
Well, as long as you can get away with it. Of course, you can't fool your body.
No. I'm in my 50s now. I'm finding that out.
Yeah, you can fool yourself. You can fool your neighbors, but you won't fool your body.
Your body knows.
Oh, yes. And even though I made it to the cancer and all that stuff, I still am reminded frequently. Recently, the weather's changing here. So the arthritis in my 2 big toes has got me limping around the house. And once the weather changes and gets cold, I'll be okay again. But that's something that's only come on in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. So that's, the arthritis is just age. And it happens. And I got a spot on my thumb that if I bump it wrong, it feels like I smashed it with a hammer. Oof. It's just arthritis in a little joint. Sucks. But hey, it's better than dead.
Well, yeah, it beats other options, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Better than the quick shove in the oven, as I like to put it. Yeah, I went through chemo. Yeah, it was shit. Yeah, it was terrible. But I ain't dead. And so, when it comes down at the end of the day, well, not dead wins every time.
Somebody once said, any day you wake up and there's not a white chalk outline around your body is a good day.
Or a sheet over your face. I've heard several variations on that. Just waking up every morning after a certain age, every morning you wake up, you go, oh, another day. Okay. And you start to enjoy them a lot more.
So
there's another one.
I want to thank you for coming on the show. We went all over.
Yeah, what you're going to be able to do with this, I have
You
no
totally
idea.
trashed all my interview notes. There are questions I didn't even ask. Maybe we.
Oh, what? Like what? Give me an example of one.
Well,
I'll give you a fast answer before we go off the air.
Well, I caught your interview. I was watching the interview on Inexorable Word Nerd with Ed Greenwood and one of the guys from New TSR.
Yeah, I'm not. You might have noticed that I'm not a real chummy with that new guy from TSR. You might have noticed that.
You're not real chummy with him.
Oh no.
Well,
no. I told him, I don't know which one you saw, but in one of them he goes, "We're TSR," and I told him, "No, you're not. And you can call yourself anything you like. Those three letters do not make you TSR. You're not." And he shut up about that shit for the rest of the interview.
Well,
I'm not going to listen to that. They can call themselves anything they like, but they ain't.
Well, they did a big
announcement. Myself a Paiute Indian doesn't make me a Paiute Indian.
That they're doing a reboot of Star Frontiers, and I've obviously been kind of a mover and a shaker in the Star Frontiers community since I've written all this content.
Be very, very, very cautious about getting into bed with any of those people.
Well, they're kind of pissed at me now because they had been telling me that, oh yeah, we got Larry Elmore doing the cover. Well, I was an industry insider, came to me, chatted me up online and said, I don't think Larry Elmore is doing
I don't know if you're familiar with the dumpster fire that happened up there a couple months ago when they were touting the new convention that they were going to run and making just wildly exaggerated claims. And they annoyed a lot of people with some of those claims. And then somebody who was in charge of one of their Facebook pages, whatever idiot they had running it, went on and started getting into a pissing contest about trans people. And someone who identified as a trans woman and made a post, and this idiot said, "You're disgusting." Oh. And that lit the dumpster fire.
Yeah.
And several trans people that I know in the industry approached me and said, "Can you address this idiot?" And so 2 days later in my curmudgeon, I addressed the dumpster fire that was going on in Lake Geneva and earned many, many kudos from the trans people that I know and helped put out a little of the fire that was going on. And unbeknownst to me, N-World and somebody else published a link, and I went from 600 views to 16,000 1 week. Nice. Like, holy cow! What happened? Oh yeah, that's the dumpster fire episode. Okay, that's why N-World and somebody else addressed it. So I gave a very measured address, and it wasn't really dealing with them per se, but what they had started. And I used a phrase that's been slightly misquoted a few times, but I'll still stand by it. And I said something about, if you sit down at my table, you're the person in seat number 6. I'm not going to ask to look under your skirt or down your trousers. I don't care. You're number 6. Mm. Well, that got mangled a couple of times, but nothing horrible that I had to apologize later for. And the gist of it remained the same. But I meant it at the time. I don't care. I've probably had many trans people at my tables over the years. Who cares? Your table, your seat number 4. You're playing pre-gen named Vic. I don't care. We're all gamers. Yeah, we're all here to play.
And at my table, if you're playing a pre-gen, you can change the name. You can change the gender if you want. I really don't care.
Well, I've had to give mine some. I've given mine some gender neutral names, and the rest of them, if I have ladies at the table, I say you can call them anything you want, I said, these date back many years. They do. And I made these up, 10, 12 years ago. And I've refined and used them ever since. So I've had to neutralize a few of my names. And the rest of them I say, call it whatever. I don't care. Male, female, doesn't make any difference. I'm giving you a clay model. You make out of it what you want.
Well,
and that's what we do.
What I wanted to specifically ask was that Ed Greenwood was on that interview, and then they brought
that was the first time Ed and I had ever sat down at the same place to even have a chance to speak with each other. And after that, I got him on a Zoom call and we had a long chat because we'd never sat down and talked with each other.
One of the things that Ed said, because what's going on now is you're getting social justice warriors who are going back and looking at something that you guys are credited as writing 40 years ago.
The new interpretationists. The Ninis. I like to call them the Ninis.
And Ed said, and you could probably speak to this as an editor, that things that I wrote were edited by somebody who were edited by somebody who were edited by somebody. He goes, and even though I'm credited, those are probably not even my words. And so how could you comment on the whole editing process making this reinterpreting of things 40 years ago problematic? And how likely are these interpretations to be so inaccurate that
that's what started that stream? Was I was just surfing down Facebook and somebody's coming on that night defending me. Oh, okay. I went over, I clicked on it. Hi, and that's how I ended up there. Ed and me and that individual from the new TSR. And I've learned to be a little more circumspect.
He that shall not be named.
Well, he is a little arrogant. And he's making some pretty bogus bullshit claims, but be that as it may.
I don't think he's half as arrogant as the guy running the company.
Well, Justin LaNasa, the Gritz wrestler. You've heard about that, right? Yeah.
I did my research after a while and I discovered that.
Yeah, there was a time before I found out it was a for-profit that I was considering donating a couple of items to the museum. And then I found out it was a for-profit and I couldn't write off the donation, so I said no. If I can't write it off, I'm not going to do it.
Well, I'm a father and a stepfather. I've got 4 daughters. I'm a little bit troubled by that whole Gritz wrestling thing.
Well, there again, it's context. In South Carolina, that might have been as normal as ice skating on Lake Erie. It might have been. We don't know. I'm willing to go. All right. Does it sleazy? Yeah. But our sleazy is not is might have been what sold him more tattoos. Because that's his main money makers is tattoo parlors.
Yeah.
And I don't like it either. But again, that's like saying that we made the drow to be African Americans. No. What bothered me about the drow was if they lived underground, they should have been white like the Eloi in the Time Machine and not black. They should have been no pigment instead of all pigment. And I said something and I was poo-pooed because I was no longer doing that kind of stuff. I just made a comment one day walking by a content meeting or something about how come you got guys living underground that are black? Not because of Americans or Negroes or any of that bullshit. Why are they black underground? They should be white. That's the way pigment works. We weren't, orcs are some poor mistreated. Oh, bullshit. Orcs are monsters that Tolkien invented that are sort of kind of like a lot of other unnamed or more generically named things from Germanic, from Celtic, from Scandinavian literature and mythology. And we're a product of our times. I still have pronoun problems. And about every other curmudgeon, I apologize for my pronouns if I get one wrong. Sorry. Just remember, I learned grammar 65 years ago. And so, but these new interpretationists are driving me crazy. painting us as racists and bigots for something we did 40, 45 years ago. I never, ever once heard Gary say anything that could have been remotely considered racist. Not once ever in all the years I knew him. Not once. I don't believe the man if he had a racist bone in his body, he kept it very, very well hidden. I never heard Brian say anything like that. We just weren't. We're a bunch of corn-fed boys from the Midwest when you get right down to it. Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, and that was a hotbed area of gaming through the 60s and kept gaming alive in that area. Gary's group, Dave's group, they kept it. They had their own little newsletters and stuff, and they kept it going. They were the tenders of the flame. Now it's a bonfire, and we just weren't. I was raised to be colorblind, and for somebody now to call me a racist, obviously they've not seen my Facebook page, because I have my entire family on there, about 60% of which is varying shades of brown. Yeah, I'm a racist, all right. Oh yeah. It's ludicrous, and it's looking at today's prism, today's lens.
Well, it's racist because they're judging you by your white skin.
And well, yeah, I'm white. I must have been a racist.
My first wife was a person of color. My daughters are mulatto. I raised a black stepson. I still haven't done enough to get my race card punched. So yeah. It is what it is.
A degree of acceptance.
People I'm acquaintances with, people I'm friends with, they accept me as their opinion.
The street I live on, the little cul-de-sac. When I moved here, it was about 65-35 white. It's about 80-20 black now. I'm still here 40 years later. I get along with all my neighbors. We keep our large yards looking nice. Somebody's can blows into the street, we pick it up for them. It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
And I have 2 children, and my daughter had 2 children, and each of them has had 2 or more children. Now my son has 2 children, and his 2 children haven't started yet. So eventually, I'm going to get, if I live long enough, I'll have a balance of blonde, white, and white great-grandchildren and great-grandchildren of varying shades of color, including my oldest great-grandchild, who, if you didn't look carefully at her hair, you'd have no idea that she's half black, because she's blonde and blue-eyed and fair-skinned. But if you ask her, she identifies black, because her brothers and her mom and her dad are varying shades of black, because mom and dad are each half white. And if you didn't, she's got, if you treat her hair right, she could be an Irish dancer and not have to buy the wig. But if it gets hot, then the curls get a little tighter, and then you go, oh, she's got really curly hair. Yeah. That's the only indicator you might have that she's not another little Viking descendant of me, because the whole other half of the family is.
Yeah.
So but these ninis, these new interpretationists that want to, I hated the English teachers that assigned you a story and then you spent 3 days picking out what the author meant. How do you know what the author meant? Somebody at some college somewhere interpreted this novel, and so now every poor son of a bitch that's taken English in his sophomore year is being this is what Hardy meant when he wrote this. I used to get in all sorts of trouble coming up with, no, I think he meant, no, I don't think that's what, I did not get along well with a couple of my English teachers because I just didn't buy into their idea of what the author meant. The guy's been dead 100 years. How can you possibly know what he meant?
Well,
I hated those classes. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing to us now. They're doing something we wrote 45, 50 years ago and trying to guess what was in our minds when we did it and then ascribe those evil intentions to us. When when you come right down to it, it's their twisted minds that are accusing us of something we didn't do. They're the ones saying racism where none existed. So what's that say about their sick and twisted minds?
Well, it kind of says that they are the racists.
Yeah, they're looking for it in everybody else too.
It's like that line in Hamlet. Methinks the woman doth protest too much.
Yeah.
The thing that they're concerned about is the thing that they have an issue with. Like,
Yeah,
I had a friend who would always say, he would always say, "Oh, you're lying." He just said it as a figure of speech.
and he lied a lot.
But it turned out that he really had a problem with lying. He was very concerned with that. And, it just, the thing that the person is concerned about, that's usually the thing they have a problem with. My experience.
Well, I'm surprised that they haven't decided that the Bulette has some inner weird, meaning behind it. And I have a thing against hobbits. And that means I don't like people that are short. And that means that I don't like dwarves and midgets because I made a monster that eats hobbits. That's just as good a logic as any of that other shit. And the only reason I made the Bulette the way I did was because there was too many damn hobbits in the game and dwarven ponies were overrunning the place. So I made a monster that eats ponies and will sniff them out in the wilderness.
Well,
Just a means of, we were just keeping a lid on the game. It was like having a hunting quota. No, we're overpopulated with dwarven ponies. We're going to introduce a predator here, and he's going to get the population right back there where we think it ought to be. And that's what we did. More than once, not just the Bulette.
I just love the Bulette because it was a chance to do Jaws and do it in D&D on land.
Well, and I've told the story often enough how I came up with Land Shark and all that. I was listening to a repeat of the Saturday Night Live that had the Chevy Chase trying to deliver chocolates. Candy Graham, Land Shark. And I heard the Land Shark and I said, oh, that's it. And that made me decide that the patch on the back raised up like a sail and there would be a weak spot underneath it, all from that Land Shark. Because I was writing it at the time, heard it in the next room, probably had a good buzz going, and just fell into place. And I had a new monster. It had a common language nickname. Had a weak spot because I never made anything that couldn't be beat. Everything has to be able to be beat, or else why bother? It's like coming up with another new dragon. Why? Hardly anybody can beat a dragon anyway. If the dragon's played right, it takes a whole damn village armed with arbalets and ballistas and shit like that to kill a dragon. Not 6 knuckleheads with swords. But that's fantasy. Anyway, we got off topic again. It's easy.
Yeah. Well,
gaming doesn't have one track topic line. Gaming is like, I don't know. It's like being confronted with 7 off ramps, each having 7 off ramps. You can end up so far down the off ramps. You started back here on the highway. But 7 times 7 times 7 chances later, now we're talking about how many bolts were on the front glasses plate of a Sherman tank.
Well, in seminary, we called that rabbit trailing.
Well, I call it going down the rabbit hole. You just you hope you're going to hit bottom here pretty soon.
I enjoy going down the rabbit hole with you tonight.
I'm always there for a good rabbit drop.
All right, so I just want to thank Tim Kask for a great interview. He really does a great interview, and I want to thank you for watching the video. Thanks to my subscribers, you guys are great. And there's been a lot of encouragement coming my way from you guys out there in YouTube land, and I just want to say thank you. I appreciate it. You're wondering, I don't know if I feel like doing a video today, and that's somebody just says something really nice. I appreciate it. It's you guys are great, and I appreciate all the encouragement. So we're signing out for the tap room, and keep on gaming.